I spent my life protecting my son. I spent my life protecting my family.
Let's be reasonable, okay? That's your big thing, isn't it, Michael? Reason backed up by murder.
Oh, God. You hate me. You hate me.
No, I don't hate you. I dread you.
I did what I could, Kay, to protect all of you from the horrors of this world.
But you became my horror.
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello and welcome to episode 114 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm your host Becca, and as always joined by the incredibly diverse people such as Chris and Dave. How are you?
I'm just thinking, how do we represent diverse? We're both
white males.
White males.
Well, Dave, you're in one age bracket, and Chris, you're in another age bracket.
Kind of. I mean, like, can we claim height? I mean, I don't know how tall Dave is.
What's the geographical location?
You're not very tall, are you, Chris?
About 5'7".
Yeah, no, I'm 6 foot. I'm a bit taller than you.
Oh. That's
so, yeah, there you are. The diverse in height and age. There we are.
One's up north and the other's down south.
Exactly. What more can you want?
Too many jokes that I won't go with.
I didn't know I was going to say that.
Alright.
Anyway. To a heavy heart that we reach the end of the Corleone saga this evening. We're finally getting around to reviewing the wonderful film that is The Godfather Part 3, starring Al Pacino, or some fake names that we came up with earlier.
No, do the real names.
Yeah, I do the real names.
I'm sure they're bulletproof. We've not killed off anyone.
The fake ones are quite hilarious. Yeah, Al Pacino, Bridget Fonda, Joe Montana, I can't pronounce his name, Keating, Monty Garcia, Tanya Shire, Eli Wallach, Sofia Coppola, and George Hamilton.
George Hamilton?
Yeah, that's how you pronounce his name. There's a question mark on it properly. It's like Moulin Rouge.
It was like he hasn't been in any two films, and all of a sudden he's a crucial character.
He's like,
why?
He's like, really? George Hamilton?
I was most surprised you went with Bridget Fonda second billing.
Well, what I've done is I've tried to do like Man
Sorry,
Woman,
Al Pacino and Bridget Fonda, the bloke who served the crackers, Talia Shire,
and then Andy Garcia.
Yeah.
But I kind of went. I like to try to do a bit of like gender equality, but I've done like man, woman. But rather than just reading that IMDb.com list.
I would have gone Diane Keaton or Talia Shire over Bridget Fonda.
Well, I know, but I just pick names at random, you know.
Fair enough.
Yeah, rather than reading off IMDb.com. Obviously, yep, written by Mario Hughes and Francis Ford Coppola, and directed by Francis Ford Coppola, and released in 1990. A massive gap between episode 2 and part 2 and part 3.
I got what time of year that this came out completely wrong. I got confused with a few other films from this year. Came out Christmas Day.
Oh, really?
Release. Yeah, it did.
In the States?
I always thought it was earlier.
Particularly 1991.
I always thought it came out around March, but maybe we got it sort of March 91 or something. I don't know.
Probably, yeah. I mean, the release dates were a little bit later, generally.
March 1991 we got it. I'm just looking now. So I was right, but I was actually a year out. I thought it came out somewhere around the same time as Rocky 5. A double sort of whammy of quality there for Talia Shire. But no, I've got to look up Rocky 5's release date now, because I'm like, we got that 25th of January 1991. I've lost a year of my life somewhere.
Oh no!
What happened to 1990?
Have you looked down the sofa? It might be there.
Oh, look. Fuck, it is as well. It's got a pair of Chris Cross's jeans down here as well.
Using a decade down the back of the sofa.
I'm totally crossed out now.
Oh, that's so funny. Losing 1990. That's it. Yeah, you're crisscrossed out.
Yeah.
Oh, snort. So funny. So anyway, what? How can we approach this rather interesting film and end to like one of the greatest sagas within popular culture?
Well, I didn't realise it was this film that had the quote of just when they thought that I was out, they pull me back in. I didn't actually realise it was this film that was off. I assumed it would be like one of the first two.
Or something.
Yeah, I assumed it would be in one of the first two because it's such a.
I could always picture where in this film it was. It was him in the kitchen.
Yeah.
Just
It was in a lovely cardigan.
It's an interesting contrast as well compared to, say, for example, like Godfather Part 2 when he does assume the role, as compared to obviously this one where he's in the kitchen, so like family setting, obviously Grandad Cardi, and it's completely kind of he's still trying to retain that air of quite respect, but also I'm trying to retire, but it's not going so well, so.
I think this, when you look at the making of this film, it's not a film Coppola ever wanted to make. Now, he expressed concerns about making the second one, but that was more about his experiences on the first. I think by the time we get to this one, it's a couple of decades before. He's not bothered about repeating himself and going back to this family and all the rest of it. But he'd lost a lot of money. He poured a lot of his own money into films, particularly one called One from the Heart, from the early 80s. Coppola lost a lot of money on a lot of occasions, but that one particularly. And it's that sort of thing that does lead us to things like when Peggy Sue got married, later on things like Jack, which we laughed at a couple of weeks ago, but he became a director for hire because he had no money. That said, he's got a bit more quality control with The Godfather because a lot of his greatest successes come from it, and he had members of his own family in it and so on. I think he always, as he says on the special features, minds the emotional subject matter of that family. So I think he would have always done his best to do it properly. But Frank Mancuso, who was the head of Paramount at one time, said on the special features that Francis Ford Coppola never said no to me, he said. But he certainly wasn't saying yes either for a couple of years. They tried various versions of scripts from right back in the late 70s. There was a script knocking around with kind of a version of the Vincent character, but not exactly the same, and a very different story. But this was just something that he sort of percolated on until eventually he was brought in. And what you've got is a director who's got nowhere near the same power as he did the first time round. Or the second time round, to be more precise. When he did the second one, he was able to say, I don't want any of the producers on the set, I want to... That was it. That was the story I got slightly wrong last week. He wanted to call it The Godfather Part 2, and the studio didn't. They thought Part 2 was a bit of a sort of, lame sequel title, just calling something 2. We're used to that all the time now, but it wasn't so common then. By the time we get to this film, he wanted to call it The Death of Michael Corleone. And they wouldn't allow it. They wouldn't allow it, and he didn't.
Spoilers!
Spoiler alert.
Well, it could be a figurative death. Yeah. It isn't though. But he didn't have the clout by then. So the studio insisted on The Godfather Part 3. Once again, he scripted it out with Mario Puzo. Once again, he got most people on board. I'll talk about one casting thing before we get into the film. Two casting things, actually. But one was a bit of an argument. And this is what we got. And I think I'll wait till sort of first thoughts to say how I think it affects the film. In terms of casting, well, everyone signed up with two exceptions, one exception, that exception being Robert Duvall. Now, on the special features, Coppola claims or says, but it's a throwaway remark, so I don't think you should take it literally to its word. He said he wanted as much money as Al Pacino. A few years ago, he appeared on Inside the Actors Studio, Robert Duvall, and he actually said he would have been perfectly happy with Al Pacino earning twice as much as him. He said, but it was getting to the point that it was like 3 or 4 times as much. He found the amount of money they were offering insulting, and I think, given he saw the end result and presumably wasn't that impressed with it, he said he doesn't have any regrets he wasn't in it. The other big casting issue we've got is Sofia Coppola, who is now most regarded as a film director. Francis Ford Coppola's daughter, at the age of 19, or certainly 19 on release, was in this film, playing the daughter Mary. This film is a mixture of awards, Oscar nominations, and 2 Razzies for her. My thoughts on the Razzies, we've expounded on it on previous occasions. It's not the greatest performance, but it was a last-minute thing. Now, people know half of this story. They know that Winona Ryder pulled out sick a day or two before filming was due to start. Winona Ryder was in herself a replacement for Julia Roberts. Julia Roberts had been cast, but had to drop out due to a scheduling conflict. The bit that always makes me laugh, though, is Madonna lobbied hard to play this role.
Oh my god.
32-year-old Madonna. This woman has no fucking self-awareness whatsoever. Just like, put me in the role. I can't act. I'm completely wrong for it, and I'm over a decade too old. But put me in it.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I'm just shooting Dick Tracy. That'll be huge. Put me in it.
It's just, yeah.
Yeah, and then fast forward to 2002, Die Another Day. Oh my god.
Yeah, but like I said when we reviewed that film, if she'd not been the name actress Madonna and did that exact same cameo, no one would have had any problems with it.
Oh, exactly.
She's not a good actress, but it's that lack of self-awareness. I'll grace your little series with a cameo. What, the Bond series that's been around longer than you? But anyway, so we ended up with Sofia Coppola, and we ended up with George Hamilton in a sort of rewritten role to take that sort of consigliere role, although by then he's the chief family lawyer. Other notable castings, obviously Andy Garcia. He's actually of a Cuban background, not Italian, but he was cast as Vincent Mancini, and we will get into who that character is when we get into the film, and a load of people we have seen before. But some good new castings. Joe Mantegna in a role that doesn't actually last that long into the film. Nice to see Eli Wallach, getting quite old by then. But
He's quite good in this, actually.
I like Eli Wallach.
He's like the older statesman.
You might have remember him from all the westerns.
From all the westerns he was ever in.
Yeah. So that's a little bit on background. There's not a massive amount to say in terms of pre-production, other than Coppola was in financial difficulties, and he thought he told the story, and on the commentary he talks of this as an epilogue. It's a 2-part series with this as an epilogue, and like I say, I'll get into my first thoughts before I explain what I think that has as an effect. But what about you guys? Had you seen this before?
I can't imagine Julia Roberts being in this film. I just find that a bit of an odd casting.
I can't really see it either, to be honest with you. But then you tend to go through what's there.
Yeah.
I'm always imagining Sofia Coppola, but like a better actress.
Yeah, I can imagine Winona Ryder, definitely.
Well, Winona Ryder's dark colouring, isn't she?
Yeah.
She
So,
could probably get the look of her, could probably get away with it. But yeah, I understand obviously Sofia Coppola with obviously the family collection. I mean, I can't act, but I think I admire her more as a director, shall we say?
Yeah, but the fact that we can't act, I mean, if you limited our ability to comment on the things we can do, I might just get away doing a podcast about project management, possibly. And I'm not even that good at that. So I mean, we're quite welcome to comment. I mean, the fact is, Sofia Coppola has taken an excessive amount of shit for how she is in this film. She's not very good. She isn't. There's no hiding away from it.
She tries her best.
Trying is well, neither here nor there really. Everyone tries, but the fact is, she's not in the film that much.
No, she's very small amount of screen time.
She's not that ruinous to anything. She's a very young adult anyway, so you can get away with that slight Valley Girl sort of the way she comes off. There's one scene where she bothers me in this, one scene, and even then she's meant to be playing slightly petulant anyway, so it's not in that scene. So it's not the biggest of big deals. She's not good casting, and as soon as you put her next to even decent actors, you can see. I just feel like if you went to see her in some like amateur production on stage somewhere, she'd probably seem really good. But she's playing off Oscar-winning actors and actresses here. and so her lack of screen presence really shows.
She does give Andy Garcia like the most lustful looks like I've seen, you know. So I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure that's good acting, or she just generally really wants to fuck Andy Garcia.
Yeah. Dad, can we take 5 minutes? Yeah, I mean, she is up against a lot of very strong actors and actresses, but the fact is, they're all in their like 40s, 50s, and 60s, and she's like 19. Well, if you've ever been to any kind of family do, where I don't know, you go to a wedding where it's somebody's second or third marriage, and they have like their young adult son as a best man. You know, they have their 17-year-old son as the best man. Well, he'll get up and give a halting, awkward, not very funny speech because he's 17. So when she gets up to like talk and she's not wildly fluent, I just think what's to be expected. She's a kid. So I don't have the biggest of big problems with her. But the film more generally, had you much time with this before? Or had you seen it? Did you like it?
I've seen it once before, properly, and then I've never revisited it again. Much like the rest of the Godfather series. I mean, I've already watched the whole series back to back in a series of a few days. So once I've had the DVD collection, so I dusted off and rewatched it for this series. Yeah, I had a good viewing of this, surprisingly. It's not better than the other two films. It's compromised by the fact that its existence really doesn't really need to exist, quite frankly. There's some of the casting is telling, and it is, should we say, more what's the word? Generic. The actual film itself isn't anything that special, but it looks nice. I had a good time revisiting the characters, and I think it was mostly down to the fact that, I mean, to watch the previous two films, there was a little bit of investment in the characters or something. They had the back history, and the film was, to me, mostly about reflecting on that history and sort of, it was just nice to watch. I had a reasonably good time with it.
My experience is probably the same as yours, Chris. I sort of also watched it maybe like a decade ago, and then obviously watched it again for this podcast. Haven't seen it since. But yeah, no, it does seem a little bit like extraneous. They could have probably stopped at part 2, but no, they had to revive it again in 1990. I think it got up to the point, I feel a bit bad, it kind of didn't really hold my attention up until the point where you've got like all the hoods in the room, and there's kind of like a helicopter shootout, as it were, a hit from above.
It does have some good set piece, I thought. It had a good sort of, okay, that's a good set of visuals.
Oh yeah, no, it still looks good, like the look of it, like visually. How else is it going to look? Like in terms of the colours. One thing stood out to me, like for example, is even though it's set like 1979, it could have been set 1990 in terms of like the costumes and the hair and everything. I found that a little bit kind of, I don't know.
He has essentially shot it to look present day to the time it was made.
Yeah, rather than 1979.
With a couple of exceptions. There's a couple of people at the party. I mean, Vincent's leather jacket at that party is not the leather jackets you were wearing in 1990. So that's a
no,
little
that
bit
kind of places it a little bit.
And possibly Kay looks very late 70s as well. But the rest of them are wearing double-breasted suits, which were really in vogue around 1990. And the hairstyles, that sort of, even Michael's, the way it's swept back is very 1990 as well.
Certainly in terms of some of the interior decoration as well, for like the kitchen, and also like the business, like the boardroom where they have the meeting of all the hoods, before they're gunned down from above. But yeah, I think it kind of gripped my attention from that point onwards, really. The stuff with like the I can't pronounce it, Immobiliare, I think that does kind of go on a little bit. I appreciate it's quite important, obviously, because they're dealing with directly from, the Pope. But again, it just kind of goes on and on. It's like, are you done yet? But it's quite interesting to,
I really liked how they handled the opera stuff at the end, because usually with the last two films, they always end with like a montage of assassinations as like the colony's clean house kind of thing. And they kind of did that, but they also mirrored with actual stuff happening. So there was like an added tension, and there was something more to it, which I really kind of enjoyed that. So that was one thing I thought they actually did a good job with. I thought.
Really
no, I'd agree as well.
Really felt like a Godfather film at that point as well.
Kind of, yeah, it really brought it all home, didn't it? Definitely.
I mean, for me, I wouldn't say I always watch it when I watch the Godfather films. I do sometimes stop at 2, but I don't watch them that often anyway. So, for argument's sake, if I watch it every other time I watch the Godfather films, then I probably haven't seen it for about 12 years. So I don't watch it very often. I've never had any great problems with it. I think I'm naturally inclined to defend it a little bit, just because, and I've said this before on a podcast when we referred to this, but it's the best example I can think of, and it's the same year as well, that it gets talked about like it's a Highlander 2 level abomination. Like, Highlander 2 came out in 1990, 4 years after a really liked original, and retconned everything, made absolutely no sense as well, looked terrible, was acted awful, and was just everyone left like scratching their head, like, what the fuck was that? It made no sense. It could have come from a different series entirely. And so Highlander 2 is frequently talked about as one of the most embarrassing, piss-poor sequels of all time. And it's talked about like it's that level of abomination. I've heard jokes about it on, like, going back, I think it was the Mel Gibson episode of The Simpsons, which in itself's about 18 years ago. But, you know, they said something, they were making Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or something, and I'm sure there's a line where they say something like, this is as bad as The Godfather Part 3, and Mel's like, let's not say things we can't take back. And I've just never understood that. It's going to struggle years after 2 masterpieces with a guy who isn't the same filmmaker anymore. The film doesn't have the same reason for being, but it's a solidly made, largely solidly acted film. It looks like a Godfather film. It kind of feels like a Godfather film. It's just damned by being a bit mediocre, which is, it's the worst series to be mediocre in. It's a bit like if Toy Story comes back and it's not very good. You know, there are certain things where they've always produced, like, generally thought to have produced quality.
How successful was it? Just out of interest.
Took 136 million. That's a figure that just stuck in my head. That was off a budget of about 50, something like that. So it's solidly enough. Because
I was thinking, like, if this wasn't, let's just say, they just did like a gangster film. Well, it wasn't like Godfather, wasn't the Colonies, but it was basically the same film, but just different set of characters, right? It would probably be thought of more fondly. It'd probably be like, oh, this is like.
I'm actually typing because I'm looking up what Dick Tracy did the same year, which is a bad example because it's a.
That was also Al Pacino as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. But she was nominated for a supporting.
Well, Dick Tracy is a name franchise. Well, not a franchise, but it's a name, Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
That took 162 million, looking at it. So not wildly in a different... That's funny, the cinematographer for that was Vittorio Storaro. He worked with Coppola on Apocalypse Now, which is a gorgeous film. But yeah, it did very well. I mean, they're not even at the point where it's grossing the same as the first one, but then the second one didn't either. I mean, just some opening thoughts then from me. I think the biggest problem is this film has no reason for being. So you've got to think of something. And if they start in 1979, Michael's already 60. So how many years can you cover when he's already getting older? So I think the thing that really sticks out to me with this film is twofold. So 2 things stick out to me. Firstly, the time frame of the film is so short. If you forget the sort of epilogue scene, which is obviously, well, not obviously, but I'm telling you, it's 18 years afterwards. That's not on screen anywhere, but I know that from the box set that the saga goes to 1997. So, but at the start of the film, he's writing to his kids, and you can see the letter, and he's handwritten a date of February. Well, the end of the film takes place in the spring. We don't know when in the spring, but we're told Anthony makes his opera debut, and I misremembered that entirely, and we'll get to that when we get into the film, in the spring in Sicily. So there's nothing that makes me think that isn't the same year. So I think the film probably covers about 3 months. Particularly with things like popes dying, they're a year out on that. The 2 popes are dying. They've got the names of the popes right, but not the names of the people that became that pope right, if you like. So Pope John Paul I, the character in this, I'm looking for his name now, is Cardinal Lamberto. Well, Cardinal Lamberto, the Pope John Paul I, the cardinal that was made that pope wasn't called Lamberto, he was called Luciano. So they've made different things, but all of those things happened in 1978, so they've deliberately sort of, but it's around the same era. So I think the point I'm making is we're not covering several years either way, we're covering a few months, so it doesn't have the same epic sweep. And I think also the plot just feels a bit perfunctory as well. The Immobiliare stuff is by far the least interesting stuff to me. And I'm sure there are thematic things, in that it's, reaching for legitimacy and all of the rest of it. But I never find any of it that interesting. The interest in this film is a weakening Michael trying to, and literally weakening, because we find out through the film he's got diabetes and it's getting worse. And he's trying to make amends to his family, and he's trying to find some kind of redemption with Kay, and he's trying to school Vincent in understanding what the life involves and what the price you pay for it, making it actually that the price of giving up Michael's daughter is actually fairly small fry when you think what Michael gave up to for this life, spiritually, emotionally, and everything else. All of those things are very interesting. The only thing I would debate, and I could be saying the exact opposite when we get to The Last Jedi, so I've got to be a bit careful here, is I sometimes wonder if Michael is too different from where he was in Part 2 as we start this film. But then, having said that, I've defended Luke being so different in The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about that in 3 or 4 weeks. Slightly different, because there's external circumstances there, and also it's 30 years. Whereas here we're talking about 12, 13 years.
I think partly that is maybe down to the way Pacino acts, not his actual performance, but the way, he's, as we commented, he's a very much more, scent of a woman type,
Hoo-ah!
Yeah,
but
he's
he's much more. There's a slight happy-go-luckiness to him. I know he has his moments because he goes and gives confession, but you see him at that opening party where he's making jokes about going off to listen to Tony Bennett records. The Michael of Part 2 wouldn't have said anything like that.
I think,
lost any sense of humour at all.
There is a sense of time getting a little bit more comfortable, but there is a difference in him.
But that could be pride in his children. That could have been anything. And also, we don't know what's happened in the interim, because at the end of Part 2, he's got his kids and he's forced Kay out the door. We find out in this film they were brought up and educated with Kay. So at some point, he saw sense and gave them to their mother. When I say sense, I mean sense in this particular scenario. Not the kids should necessarily never be with their fathers, but in this case, that made sense. So we can talk about that as we go through it. Certainly, some of the complaints I've read about this film is Michael's not even the same character, and I sit on the fence on it. I note it, I see people's point. I'm not sure, because you're not the same person at 60 as maybe you were in your 40s. And he's gone through a lot, and he's got 2 grown-up children now, and I know very early in the film he changes path, but he's clearly very proud of his youngest daughter, but his son is at law school when the film starts, and he's very proud of him, and and he's moved out of Nevada, and perhaps all of that was sort of eaten away at his soul as well. So there's all sorts of different ways you can read it. But yeah, just to finish off my opening thoughts, I think this is pretty solid stuff. I don't think it's a great film. I think it's kind of mediocre, actually. But I can't help but defend it when it's painted like it's Highlander 2. It isn't in the same league of heinous crime. This suffers because it follows two masterpieces. It also suffers for the same reason something like Jason Bourne suffers, in that they made 3 Bourne films in about 5 years, and they were all really good. How well they've dated and what we think of them, we'll get to them one day, I'm sure. But when they come back 9 years later, you think, and they frequently said they weren't interested in coming back. You know, Greengrass always said, I don't want to make another one. And basically, Matt Damon just used to say, as Paul Greengrass, i.e. I'll come back if he does. Yeah. A bit like Bale with Nolan. You know, Nolan always said, I don't want to do another Batman film. When they asked Bale the same question, it'd be, well, if Nolan. Yeah. But they come back after 9 years with Jason Bourne. And you tend to think, well, Jason Bourne's the weakest of those 4, forgetting the Bourne legacy for a minute. But had it come out in 2010, just enough of a period of time on that his life has changed a bit, but within the same sort of release window as a sequel normally is, i.e. about 3 years, I don't think it would have been slaughtered as hard. I think it just would have been, a bit of a step down, but not bad. Because it was 9 years, you think, they must have a cracking idea to be coming back now, particularly when they said they don't want to. This film suffers from that. You're revisiting The Godfather, you must have a story to tell. And it turns out he doesn't. He has a little bit of a muse on ageing and family relationships, which has always been the most interesting stuff to me. And it's interesting here too.
It builds up. It builds up like a. Well,
there's a weight of expectation.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah.
But it's solid. I think I'll stop there because I'm going on a bit. This is solid enough.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of similar. I've always feel whenever a film gets either overly praised or overly criticised, I do have the gut reaction to defend.
I'll pick on this in the detail, but the trouble is, I'm aware I'm going to do that. So at the outset, I want it on record. This isn't that bad, and on the record, Highlander 2 really is.
Highlander 2 is a fucking mess.
It is a real head scratcher.
It is a really bad film, but it's one of those really bad films that I kind of enjoy.
There can be only one.
Yes.
Yeah, they were still saying that in part 5, you know.
I think I've only ever seen the first one.
The first one's quite dated and hence a little bit overpraised, but it's a wonderful idea, and I kind of like it. And as much as it's not good, Highlander 3 plays like a sequel to the first one. So Highlander 3 is like an inferior version of the same thing, but it's actually not that bad. Highlander 2 is
it kind of politely ignores the second one because it kind of like, we're picking up back in present day now. So
Highlander 2 is a total head scratcher. You know, if you want us to cover it, folks, send us some money. I would never rule it out, but I think that'd be quite a miserable experience trying to review it. But this film is nowhere near as bad by comparison, and it doesn't deserve the hatred it gets. It's a Godfather film through the prism of being a bit mediocre.
So, shall we discuss this film in a sequential fashion?
Yeah, go on then.
I quite like the fact we start with the Nevada compound flooding and in disrepair. That as a visual cue tells you everything you need to know.
It looks very sad, isn't it? It's all kind of been like abandoned and
it's the last days of Rome, isn't it?
It's literally crumbling.
Yeah, it's being reclaimed by the lake, and it's just
reclaimed by nature.
But we cut straight to narration quite quickly. He's narrating a letter to his kids. You see him handwriting, and it's a bit TV show as a narrative device, but he's just basically telling his kids how good it is he's moved back to New York all those years ago. Isn't it, as narration goes, that's brilliant, isn't it? Isn't it amazing how I moved back to New York? And he's happier.
Let me tell you my life story, which you already know about, for the benefit of the audience.
Remember when you told me about your mother and the Sand People?
Oh.
Yeah, it's that level of thing, but it's kind of welcome. He's gone back to New York. He's living in like an apartment there, basically, albeit a very luxurious one.
It looks very, very cushy, doesn't it?
It is luxurious, well, you know, with the sort of money he throws around in this, that he's very,
It's a
very
penthouse suite.
Yeah, he's just, but we see the one he's going in. And funnily enough, it's shot by Gordon Willis, but it's shot on, like, whatever film stock they were using in 1990. And it looks like a Woody Allen film. Visually.
It still looks nice. Quality.
Yeah, I mean, Woody Allen films, like, kind of look nice, but if you go and watch something like Hannah and Her Sisters and, you know, Husbands and Wives and stuff like that, there's a similar quality to the film. But, yeah, he's about to be, what is it? It's some kind of Catholic honour, isn't it? Because he's
being bestowed, is it the Italian American of the Year sort of thing?
Well, he's commendatore thereafter. Yeah. It's some sort of papal order.
Basically blessed by the Pope.
Yeah.
So it's kind of absolved of all his previous sins, kind of-ish, but obviously
it's not confession. It's not confession. That must be clear, because he goes through that later.
Yeah, he does actually have...
So he's not absolved of anything, it's just, hey, you're a great guy for all that money you've given us.
Just the Pope recognising him, yeah. Thank you for your donation. Here's a very big medal.
And then he's back to his place for, like, a big party and cake and all that kind of shit. And Johnny Fontaine.
Yeah, how about that?
Who has actually sort of turned into Tony Bennett. The way he's walking around with that.
I completely forgot it was Johnny Fontaine, and then I was like, oh, no, or is it Tony Bennett?
Well, it's funny, whenever you see, like, Alec Baldwin doing, like, the Jeopardy piss take of it.
Eric Berggren.
Tony Bennett. The way he holds the microphone, Johnny Fontaine holds it like that as well. It's kind of cool. I kind of liked it anyway.
Yeah. It's a nice little callback. Well, it's just basically like, while all the films start out, you got an extended party scene, introducing everyone.
And this is extended a bit longer as well, because it goes to 35-40 minutes. Typically, they're under the half hour for that opening bit. So, the first sign, it's a bit thinner, but at the same time, whilst it's not as masterful as the first one, we do get a lot of information in this party, don't we?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, we have got quite a few new characters, seeing as most of them have been killed off. So,
they brought in young blood like Eli Wallach.
No, we got Andy Garcia, and then also you got to introduce Joey Salza, and that what's going on between them. And essentially, you've got a lot of catching up to do. So you kind of like find out where everyone is. You got to find out about Anthony, what he wants. He wants to become a singer. He wants to leave law school.
I misremembered all of that, because when 2 started with Anthony going through communion, I remembered him training as a priest in this film. I completely misremembered. I got confused with Tom Hagen's son.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen it for a few years. As soon as I started watching this, I was thinking, Anthony's profession is the whole set piece at the end of the film. It was immediately, not only did I remember, but I felt stupid for misremembering. But I think it was because of Tom Hagen's boy. Tom's dead. We see his boy later, but we'll get to that. But what do we learn? What do we learn at this? We learn Kay visits, but she only does it for her kids. She's remarried. She tells Michael she dreads him. I hate that dialogue. I've put it on the front of this episode, but where she says, "But you became my horror" and stuff. It would read well in a book. It doesn't work on the screen as dialogue. That.
I would have thought you would have gone for just when I thought I was out, pull me back in.
Yeah, we got that a bit later on, but so we find out Anthony wants no part of the family business. Mary's closer in that she's like honorary chairperson of the fucking Corleone Foundation and presents all the checks and stuff.
I mean, to be fair with Anthony, I mean, when he first comes in saying, you know, I want to leave law school, I want to become a singer. At first, I was kind of on side with Michael, thinking, yeah, but isn't it wise just to finish doing your law stuff? And then
how far through it are you?
Yeah, do you know what I mean?
And do you want to be an opera singer, not a pop star? It's not like trends are going to change and you'll get too old if you wait 4 years.
It's just the fact that you just said, I want to be a singer. It's like, okay, isn't it wise to have a backup plan? I mean, you know, it seems pretty sound that if this singer stuff doesn't quite work out, you've got something quite reasonable to start off with. Like, forget the family business and shit. You can still go off and make a good career with yourself. So I was kind of on Michael's side with that, but then he kind of justifies that, yeah, he's actually really, really good, generally. But
he's playing at like one of the top opera houses in the world, so yeah, he's I think that to be pretty good. I'm looking him up. The only thing I thought when I was watching it was how old's he meant to be? Because in 1958, he's what, at least 10? Maybe a bit less, I don't know. So I'm thinking he's got to be very late 20s, and I'm looking the actor up now, and he was 28 when this was released. A little bit older than I'd have expected. But he is an American singer, and he's best known for Phantom of the Opera.
Oh, really?
Looking
Didn't
him
know
up now. He's played Sweeney Todd on Broadway.
Wow.
He was
best
cast...
Johnny Depp voice.
Yeah. Demon
In
Barber.
London.
In London town.
The worst thing about I was about to say the worst thing about Johnny Depp, but it's not, is it, folks?
It's HBC.
Is the fact that he thinks he can do an English accent.
Oh, God. I've been trying to do one ever since Pirates of the Caribbean, but no.
Yeah, so he's pretty well known. The only film he's done is this film. But yeah, so he wants to drop out and become a singer, but we're not talking about some pop star or something. We're talking about a proper opera singer. What else? We find out Joey Zaza's basically got all the old sort of Corleone New York interests, and Vincent is working for him. We see Vincent arrive. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but he did arrive with his mother.
Oh, okay.
Did you not notice?
No.
When he get there, we're immediately embroiled in him about to get into a fight because they won't let him in. But a woman says to him, "Our name isn't down," and that is the same actress who was being shagged by Sonny at the start of The Godfather. So his mother is there. He is the illegitimate son of Sonny and that bridesmaid from the first film. That's not to say he was conceived at that wedding necessarily, but in fact he wouldn't be, because the actor, I think the actor's older. The actor's in his 30s by this point, but I think we find out at one point he's about 26. Which means he must have been conceived right at the end of Sonny's life. In fact, the maths doesn't work. Because if this is 1979, that means he was born in 53. I'm sure Sonny was killed before the end of the 40s. But either way, he's Sonny's son.
He must have boinked before running off and...
Yeah. Perhaps he had a big dick, didn't he? Perhaps it's like one of those Liam Neeson jokes, right? He ejaculated, and it took 4 years for it to exit the end of his knob.
Sometime.
And that was at supersonic speeds.
Sonny had like super sperm that just lay dormant, ready to wait for years to come, like after his death. Yeah. He just said, "Right now, boys."
I'm pretty sure Sonny died. Well, he died before Michael came back to the US, and that was early 50s at latest. So yeah, the maths doesn't quite work. But anyway, either way, we'll skip over that for a minute. He is the son of Sonny, and he is very transparently Sonny's boy, isn't he? They go straight for like ridiculous degrees of anger.
Yeah, he's very hot-headed.
Well, he arrives. They question whether he's not on the list, so they ask him to leave, and he's ready to kick the shit out of them. And it's a room full of gangsters. So what are you doing? It's a room full of gangsters and religious figures. So yeah, he is introduced to Michael. Joey goes to see him and basically says, "I don't know if this is my problem or your problem, because he claims to be your family, but he works for me." And I can't remember what he's saying. He's just saying he won't do what he's told, basically, isn't he? He's finding Vincent difficult to work with.
Yeah.
Michael has presumably placed him there. And they have a real testy exchange where Vincent is saying, Joey calls you this, that, and the other, and they're asked to make up, and then he bites a portion of his ear off.
Yeah, he calls him a bastard, doesn't he? Basically,
Bastardo.
and then he bites it. Yeah.
The first take of that, he caught like too much of prosthetic, pulled the whole thing off, and part of his hair as well. I mean his real hair, because some of his real hair near his ear got ripped out of his head the first take they did this. And then so he says, "Well, come and work for me for a while and see if you learn." Because he said, "I'll come and work for you," and he says, "What? As a tough guy, I need more lawyers, not tough guys." Michael is reaching to be out of this business, but he knows he ain't out yet. So Vincent goes to work for him. Joey Zaza and Michael are now a bit pissed off with each other, it seems. What else? Mary's the apple of her father's eye. Kay hates Michael really, or she at least dreads him. And
Mary really wants to fuck her cousin, which is a bit odd.
Yeah, and the age gap is big. But anyway, yeah.
Is that like a common thing, or is that like
Well, it's more what passes for like raunchy banter, because she says, "I saw you at a wedding. You were 15 and I was 8." And she's 19, so that's where I get his age from. So he's got to be 26, which the maths doesn't work. But anyway, mind you, we're never told where she's 19. The actress is 19, and in fact, she could be a bit older than that. Actually, thinking about it, the actress is 19, but that would put her birth at about 1960, and I'm not quite sure when Mary was born. It could have been before that. So there's a 7-year age gap. But she says something like, he said, "I don't know, I had lots of girlfriends," and he went, "What, 8-year-old?" And you went, "Especially 8-year-olds." And that's meant to be like playful banter. Yeah, I loved fucking 8-year-olds when I was 15. What? There's no form of playful where that works.
It's a bit dodgy, isn't it? It's a bit very, very fucking...
And you just think, alright, but I mean, I know Coppola had affairs and stuff like that, but presumably by this point it's a few years since he's chatted anyone up, because that's not how it works, surely. So what else we got? Connie is very much championing Vincent, because she's really like, yeah. And
Connie's through the films, she's changed consistently through the films, isn't she?
Well, she's very Italian mother here, isn't she?
Yeah.
Even in the way she moves.
She's pretty much like kind of in the corner of the family now. She's fully like in Michael's corner, like as a... Well, she supports Vincent, but she is with the family now. She's not... She hasn't had this like...
Do you know what?
grudges.
She's only a step away from being his consigliere.
Yeah.
She's very much his conscience. She's the one who talks to her. You know, he talks to her a lot. She talks to him. She's always got an opinion on stuff. She's one of the few able to give her opinion to him.
It's probably down to like she's like obviously the last sibling.
Yeah,
so
there is.
So there's probably like an element of like, fuck it, you know, we're the last ones. We might as well stick together, eh? Maybe.
Quite on the nose. When he's receiving his award at the start, he's seeing in his mind the death of Fredo. So it's Flashback City. Well, you couldn't watch this film only if you'd not seen the previous ones. I don't think it would, not very easily. Some of that felt a bit forced and lazy, but I mean, we've talked quite a long time. But there are about 4 or 5 plot things we wanted to get across, and that did take about 40 minutes. So it's not off to a. When you think the first film had 25 minutes of seemingly not very much, but if you sat down and wrote down what you'd learnt and what happened, it's a hell of a list. So it's not as good as that. But we've got some key things about his boy, about his relationship with Kay, and Vincent is now working for him. And that's obviously very important going forward.
And he's basically sort of organising like a deal with the Vatican, isn't he?
Yeah, the Vatican Bank have got like debt or something, and he offers hundreds of millions in exchange for shares in Immobiliare. And I keep forgetting what Immobiliare is. It's something to do with land, isn't it?
Let me have a look.
I'm trying not to look, because I don't just want to read Wikipedia pages. But I think it might be like real estate.
Unfortunately, it did kind of lose my interest a little bit.
It's because it's a boring story.
It's business speak. Real estate.
Okay.
It's quite dry as well.
Well, he wants to buy the Vatican's share in it, which will give him like the main interest, and it needs to be ratified by the Pope. We'd also seen, we did mention him in a jokey way, but Eli Wallach is at the party. He's Don Altabello. He's a New York boss, and he keeps trying to sort of get they keep mentioning the commission, right? And now if you look up the commission, it is like the governing body of the American mafia. Unfortunately, I don't think the commission's been mentioned in either of the two previous films. So I didn't really know what the fuck they were talking about. I had to look it up.
No, it's meant to be quite important. Why have we not heard about it before?
So yeah, I mean, they're saying like the five families, I'm presuming, were like the equivalent in that when they needed a group decision, they got the five families together. There is no equivalent now because they were all killed off in part one and they've diversified over the years and people have died and other people have come in. So Eli Wallach's banging on about the commission and I just don't think that is properly explained to us.
Yeah, it's sometimes you kind of think, oh, is this part of like the five families thing now, or is that still a thing, or I guess that you just accept that there is some similar arrangement, like with the crime bosses getting together, having like a group meeting, make sure they don't step on each other's toes, but they just called it something else now. I don't know.
I mean, it's clear Michael doesn't want involvement because it's mob, and he's still reaching for this legitimacy, but it's kind of, I think we can read what it is, but it is awkward to be dropping this term in the third film, but it is effectively for the commission read that room full of mobsters we get in just a little while, and I think that's why Michael just pays them all off, and he pays them multi-millions each, with the exception of Joey Zaza, because it's based on what they own and how long they've been involved.
So he got absolutely nothing, and clearly he's pissed.
Very much so.
He's not happy.
It's like, just, you have made an enemy. Actually, I can't help but not think, but do his voice on The Simpsons. It's like, I am very upset.
And it's very different as well.
He's got a very recognisable voice, hasn't he? It's like, obviously, Pacino. It's like, as soon as you hear him, you know it's Joe Montana.
Yeah, I think so. When I hear him on the special features, it's like, actually, yeah, you are quite familiar.
Quite distinctive. Like, you know it's Al Pacino, or you know it's. I'm not going to call him Cherry Garcia after his ice cream name. Andy Garcia.
Cherry Garcia. Yeah.
Cherry, not Jerry, but Cherry.
Andrew Glacier Cherries.
Yes.
So what did you call him? Like, Cappuccino, and you said, he got written off the set because he was always.
He was latte to the set every time.
He's latte to the set every day. I was like, oh my god.
And he couldn't do an Americano accent.
That's funny.
Yeah. But this
is easy. They have to order a new actor by Espresso Delivery.
I think we've milked all the coffee jokes from that.
We've done enough mockers.
No, can't cram flat white in anywhere. But this leads straight to the helicopter scene. And of course, I think that's a bit out of nowhere, but it's Zaza in league with. I think I knew at the time it was quite obviously Altabello.
Yeah,
because he was the one who was trying to talk Michael.
It is
round.
pretty obvious. Like, hang on, who's the guy who like rushed like seconds after the actual attack?
And you've just been in Michael's car trying to talk him into like letting the commission in on it.
Yeah.
So it's not very well hidden. But I do like this helicopter scene, particularly for the fruit crisp.
Yeah.
I mean,
was there fruit in this scene? I must have missed that. I just saw
apples,
bullets.
Oranges, grapes. In fact, the first thing you hear, you hear the sound of something, and then an orange falls off its pile of oranges.
There was something of a lucky coat, which was a bit like a moment of random comedy.
That's just mental, isn't it? What is that? That reminded me of Frank Drebin randomly pulling a fucking bingo card down the door. So why did he suddenly drop that in? Pretty good sequence, though.
It is something out of a spoof, though, isn't it? It's like, my lucky coat!
Yeah, not so lucky, though. He's like, my lucky coat, and then all of a sudden he gets shot up by death from above. And it's like, not so lucky now, punk.
Can't watch this without thinking of Star Trek Into Darkness. I'm thinking, no wonder they didn't catch the perpetrator. He beamed to fucking Kronos.
Oh yeah, that's true.
But yeah, no, it is quite an action-heavy scene. I mean, it's
goes on a bit as well, and I don't mean that as a negative. I mean, they threw some real money and time at this scene.
It's quite a long scene, isn't it?
Yeah, there's you see, it's the sort of like a nice shed of violence of like people just getting like just machine gunned to death.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there is an element of like, fucking hell, what would you do? Like,
where do you go? They shut the door and put handcuffs on the outside of it.
And there's no real reasonable place you can sort of just take cover, because like everywhere just seems to be getting shot to shit, no matter where you go. So
I don't know where it is they're meeting. Can you imagine being searched on the way in and you got handcuffs on you?
Mm.
You're meeting a load of other men. What are you getting up to?
I don't know. I mean, it was all stitched up from the get go, wasn't it? It's just probably a pre-arranged. But so I mean, the funny thing is though, it's like, well, so was Joey Salazar really involved? Or was he just like happened to be?
Well, the thing is as well, isn't it at the very same meeting Zaza realises he's getting nothing?
Yeah.
It's like, can you imagine
if
he'd been handed a cheque for $150 million and then he's at the window going, no, it's all right.
And then Alberto runs after him. It's like, look, don't worry, should we kill him? Yeah, all right then.
Yeah. I mean, Altobello might have known who's getting what because he's close to the Corleone family, so he's probably checked the nod. You're not going to be getting anything. The rest of them have had really generous amounts in the tens of millions in some cases. So Michael's got serious wealth. What he's basically done is liquidated his Las Vegas holdings to pay off the commission, to basically buy them off from not getting involved on this new deal.
Yeah.
They don't have any They don't have any sort of equity in Michael's businesses.
He's basically buying everyone out. He's like, okay.
It's just basically, here's a ton of money, leave me to do this Immobiliare deal. And so he does say right afterwards, because he's back in his kitchen, and that's with the famous, just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. Doesn't look very well, and that becomes clear in a minute why. I don't remember him saying it's Altobello, but I do remember him saying he didn't think Zaza was smart enough to do it.
Yeah, he hasn't got he kind of knows the type of person he is. He's basically just a thug.
Well, he knows every type of gangster, doesn't he?
Yeah, he hasn't got the connections. He hasn't got the ambition. He doesn't have the originality. I think he always did something like that.
But the brains for it, really.
Does he mention Altobello at this point though?
I don't remember.
Because I am looking at the Wikipedia page now. And he says he realises Altobello is the traitor. I don't remember that in the film.
I don't remember it, though. I do remember at the time thinking, like, well, it's clearly him, isn't it? Because, he's the one who ran out, like, literally moments after it all kicked off. It's like, well, of course it's going to be him. So maybe it might have been stating the obvious, I don't know. But there's not really much time because he has, like, a diabetic stroke anyway.
I'm caught up on Al Pacino at this point in that I think he's a terrible overactor at this stage of his life, but this is actually quite harrowing to watch.
Mm. I mean, at first you think, fucking hell, he's having a heart attack, isn't he? Shit,
Well, he's gripping his head, so I actually thought he was having a stroke, if I'm honest. I don't think at this point, and I think even until recently, I didn't actually link it to diabetes.
No.
And I think that's because I haven't really known diabetics have strokes. So I just assumed he'd had a stroke, and as we notice his health declining, he's got diabetes as well. But I think the two are linked.
Yeah, so basically he's like hospitalised, and that sort of runs tightness with the deal with I want to say with the popes, with the Vatican.
Well, it slows everything down, and of course he then goes into hospital, and we hear Connie give Vincent the go-ahead, and we're not quite sure what on, but it becomes really obvious. So while Michael's in hospital, Vincent arranges to off Joey Zaza.
Yeah, because Vincent's constantly saying we need to take him out now, and it's like whereas Michael's sort of thinking, no, because he's not doing it alone. We need to figure out who it is, essentially.
His mind goes straight to revenge and violence, just like his father. He's not ready yet. But he's ready worryingly fast when you look at the time frame of this film, but he's not ready at this point in the film. Two major things that happen when while he's in hospital is the killing of Zaza and Zaza's bodyguard. We'll talk about his bodyguard in just a second, because that's a notable figure in real life. And the beginnings of the relationship between Vincent and Mary.
Mm.
The erotic making of gnocchi. Gnocchi's nice, but it's never got me laid.
You're gnocchi? No.
I mean, there is certain parallels to the first one, isn't it? With the Godfather going into stroke, being hospitalised, and then the son, and the son sort of having to take ownership and trying to deal with it, and hits going all over the place, kind of thing. So there is some parallels to the first one. I also thought of Godfather Part 2 as well, with the parade going, with the way the hit happens.
It felt very like the Godfather 2's hit. Not quite as much love and time and everything else put to it, because that's a bigger scene.
Yeah.
But his main bodyguard and the guy we see with him when he has part of his ear bitten off and all the rest of it, is played by a guy called Vito Antuofermo. Vito Antuofermo was world middleweight champion in the late 70s.
Wow.
We're not just talking like he was a professional boxer, he was at the peak of his game.
World heavyweight champion.
He had a draw with Marvin Hagler, when Marvin Hagler was the challenger, and next time out he lost to Alan Minter, the British fighter, and then Alan Minter in turn lost his title to Marvin Hagler. But yeah, Vito Antuofermo was world middleweight champion. Went on obviously to do a bit of acting, and this is one of those things. We also see, and I'm pretty sure it's in this scene, we see Vincent with an older lady, and that's Martin Scorsese's mother. You see her again in Goodfellas because she plays Joe Pesci's mother in that, the one that they go and have dinner with when they've just killed that guy. Yeah, so I forget her first name, but she's in it.
Didn't she always used to provide the catering as well on the set of the movie?
I'm not sure. I don't know too much about it, but she did a little bit of acting, and he cast her in this. It's a fairly small role, but yeah, he kills the bodyguard whose name is escaping me at the moment, and then he shoots Zaza 3 times, twice in the back and then once through the head, and just gives it Zaza. And Michael's furious. It's don't give that order without my say so. Not while I'm alive. It's not what I wanted. In fact, it's not.
I think this is where he starts to get shouty as well.
No. It's kind of all right though. It's not too bad. He was trying to keep sort of a lid on it. So, what next?
Well,
we're not far from it because they go to Sicily like halfway through the film.
Yeah. I mean, I think that doesn't have all the relationship stuff with Mary, and they do go to Sicily.
We have missed the fact because obviously Becca gave her second billing, Bridget Fonda, and we not even mentioned her.
Well, actually, that's the point because the film starts off and it feels like she's going to have a lot more prominent role, like she's going to be like the main love interest for Andy Garcia, and she's never seen or heard from again. She's like. She gets attacked in Vincent's apartment, and she's just gets freaked out and just never seen again. Really,
I've never understood that. Bridget Fonda by this point was a name.
Yeah,
I'm not saying she was a superstar, but she was a name. You know, I mean the thing. I'm just looking back at her filmography now. The thing I remember her from is Scandal, the Christine Keeler story from before this. She was Mandy Rice Davies in that. And she'd done like 6 to 8 films.
Single White Female, was it?
Yeah, but that's after this.
Yeah.
I'm talking about what she would have been in fact, she had a bigger year the following year because she did Doc Hollywood and Single White Female and Singles and so on in the next year or so after this. But I was surprised. I'm still surprised that she's hardly in this at all. She basically is a reporter, turns up at this party at the start, tries to leverage Vincent's name to get in, doesn't work. You then know she's having at least a fling with Vincent. Vincent kills a couple of intruders to the apartment. I suspect they're Zaza's men. In fact, they tell them. He shoots one in the head, then shoots the other just as he says Joey Zaza. So that does contextualise why he's so desperate to kill Zaza off. But yeah, that we never see her again afterwards. So a bit later in the film, he's getting closer to his cousin. And they're making gnocchi together. And
in more than one way.
Is that what it's called these days?
Gnocchi is, yeah, it's called gnocchi these days. Yeah.
No, yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, and then I always wonder how he must have felt directing his daughter in that. But there you go. There's nothing that graphic, but it is quite a sexual scene. What else? So he wants. I can't remember when he says it, but he does tell Vincent he doesn't want him involved with his daughter. And I think he wants to leverage that, though, to get Vincent in with, what's he called? I've just totally... Don Altobello.
Yeah.
He basically said you need to go to like his people and say you want to be with my daughter and I'm not letting you.
Yeah. But at the same time, he wants to out harm's way. He wants Mary out harm's way, doesn't want... Because he does make a point of the fact that they come for your loved ones when which is a valid point. Though, I must say, they just seem to blatantly ignore the fact that they're fucking cousins. It's just a bit weird. It's just like...
a bit weird, yeah.
I mean, that is, at least in this country, legal.
Yeah.
But I would have thought it's frowned upon.
It's a taboo, really, isn't it? So, because people saying, "Oh, look, it's a bit weird." You can't see him, stop seeing him. And it's just like it's creepy.
Yeah, Michael never once says like, "Look, I care about my daughter. I don't want harm's way," and also, ugh. Really?
Are you mad? Your kids will have cleft palates or something.
Or 6 feet, 6 toes.
It is legal. How frowned upon it is, I don't know.
Bit gross.
That's as close as you can be related, first cousins, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But
anyway,
yeah. I'd have like a sort of edited version where he goes, "Oh, and actually,
Yeah, but he's your cousin.
Anyway.
It's like you're doing my ex-wife or something.
No, it's like you're
specifically Dave's ex-wife.
Not my ex-wife, I meant Michael's ex-wife.
Have you seen that Friends episode with Denise Richards?
Where they are like second cousins or something.
Oh.
Yeah. It is quite funny.
Oh my god.
So yeah, we're told that Anthony's making a debut in Palermo, in Sicily, in the spring, in some opera or other. I don't know which opera it is. Yeah. I'm looking at it now, actually. Cavalleria Rusticana. Okay, not one I know. So they all head off to spend some time with Don Tomasino, who we saw in the first two films. And it's at that point Michael says, basically pretend to defect from me, and he's introduced to Don Lucchese, the guy who's killed with his own glasses later in the film. And at this point, That's
quite an interesting death, I think.
I start losing track of people though, because you've got this Lucchese character, you've got the Treasury guy from the Vatican Bank who's always smoking, and then you've got.
All the other Dons come out of the woodwork, don't they? And it's like, who are you again?
They're just generically Michael's enemies. I don't really, I can't get that into it. I mean, very early in his time there, he goes and gives, he goes to meet Lamberto because he's favoured to be the next Pope, and the Pope has to sign off on the deal to talk to him about the deal, and ends up giving confession. To be honest,
I do think the confession scene is quite good, though.
I like the way it's
framed. The performance that they give is quite compelling.
I loved it. What did you think, Chris?
The confession scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was okay with it. I think it was. I think it just seemed to be like. I mean, I haven't really talked about Michael as a character generally for this film, but for the start of the film, he starts off as someone who just seems to be sort of like carrying this weight of guilt, like he's almost like slouching. I mean, part of it is his age, but he just gives that impression of someone who's just constantly mourning and constantly just down and kind of just have this big burden on. And the moment he has this big emotional confession where he's in tears admitting that he killed his own brother, there seems to be like something just lifted from him from the film since then. Like he just seems very much like.
It's around that time Kay turns up, So it might be a coincidence, but he gives confession and then he's out and about and having quite a light and easy time with Kay. So I think you're kind of right. There was a lot of criticism of this film, and I may have said it in the opening comments. I can't remember because we talked about this film off air before we started recording, so apologies if I'm repeating myself, and I'm not really going to go back and listen to work out whether I did. But there was some criticism at the start when this film came out that this just wasn't the same character. And that lady who introduced me to The Godfather Part 2, who I was dating when I was about 19, said, Godfather Part 3 is awful because Michael's just not the same character at all. And like I say, I see their point, because it's like 12 or 13 years on. He's getting, I would say towards the end of his life. He's only 60, but, in some respects he's lucky to have got this far with the life he's chosen. And I can see that he's like rethinking his choices, and he's now got adult children and like a life to enjoy with them and stuff. So I'm okay with it.
He seems to be kind of like appreciating like his children more. Like he's sort of also been proud of.
Well, the first comments we get from
him, he's like,
when he's writing to them, when he cries when he sees his son singing, which is lovely. That always reminds me of the end of Billy Elliot. Where the dad's like crying, just quietly.
Yeah, he finally accepts.
He probably accepted years before because there's a time jump. But he actually sees his son make like his West End debut or whatever.
Yeah, sort of being happy and doing what he wants to do.
Sweetly.
That's a lovely film.
The first thing we see of Michael in this film, he's writing to his children. And as lazy exposition as it is, that tells you where his priorities are. He wants to turn back the clock, really. Not literally, he doesn't want to go back 20 years, but he wants that second shot with wife and children. You can see...
He wants to rebuild a connection. He feels like... he knows he's fucked up, and now it's like...
It's with all three of them as well, though, because there is a certain look on his face when he sees Kay turn up with her husband. Because it's dropped in dialogue. He hasn't seen her for 8 years at that point. So he hasn't seen her since a handful of years after the first one. After the second film, presumably, whenever it was, he consented for his children to go to them. He hasn't seen them since. Or mum since, anyway. Kay. So... yeah, I think that's really the bits I take away from Sicily. We've got all this Immobiliare stuff, and I wish I was... I watched this film today, and I watched it a few weeks ago as well. So, it's not that I'm not familiar with it, I just don't really know what to say about it. We've got all this stuff of, like, a pope dying of old age, and then we've got, like, him replaced by this Cardinal Lamberto, and he's, like, poisoned later in the film. And there are rumours. John Paul I did only live in office about 33 days or something, and there were always rumours, was he? And I know Coppola took a lot of his cues from like what if scenarios on stuff that really happened.
I was going to say it does sort of reflect real life to a certain degree, doesn't it? Obviously, names have been changed to protect the innocent, to protect the Pope.
Well, it's not even that he's saying it's happening. He's saying that certain scenarios played out, and you could suggest maybe something. He's just taken his cue from real life to create this sort of fiction. It's not in the same year for a start, but it's clearly influenced by all of that. When he breaks down confessing that he ordered, he said, "I betrayed my wife, I betrayed myself." I never took that as sexual betrayal of his wife. I think he just means betraying the promises to her that he'd get straight. And the very fact he follows with "I betrayed myself" means that he doesn't mean infidelities and stuff. He says he ordered men killed, and he said he killed his brother. And then he breaks down, and of course his blood sugar suddenly drops as well, so he has a bit of a collapse and asks for anything sweet, and I think he gets some fruit juice and chocolate and stuff, and he's dropping that everywhere as well. It is quite an affecting scene. It's probably the most affecting scene in the film for me.
Yeah. I don't know, I think you're right in terms of all the plotty stuff. I do zone out of it, but I think the things I end up connecting more is the stuff with Michael on how he starts rebuilding the relationships. That and the stuff with Alabello and the assassination attempt and things like that. Those are the bits I kind of like hurt my ears. I kind of politely just like phase over the...
It can't bother me that much that Michael's that different.
The banky plotty stuff. It's just like, okay, they're just little minor
but
details.
I'm still that interested in Michael's story after all this time, and that must tell me something. You know, that it can't bother me that he's that different. That I'm not treating him as a new character. I'm treating him as a continuation of the story that's now covered 35 years at this point in terms of the family story. Michael's story, anyway, because we meet him in the mid-40s and we're now at the end of the 70s. But yeah, it's all about trying to ratify this Immobiliare deal, but you've got Don Lucchese, who was just using it as a way to sort of skim money.
And it does have some emotional resonance with the fact after the scene where Michael went to in the last film, you know, and this, bear in mind, it's only been like a week since we've seen it. It was probably like over 10 years, or however long it was, you know, in the making. But here, it feels like it's very satisfying to kind of like see this character kind of trying to claw his way out of like the dark depths the way he went to. You know, it feels like, oh, come on, you always kind of start rooting for him. It's like, yeah, okay, come on.
And there's something very poetic to me that he goes almost to the family home to like reborn, because when Vito left that home, he couldn't have known that it would all unfold the way it unfolded. You know, and he kind of almost fell into a life of organised crime through being like bullied by a local mobster, actually. So, you know, it's almost this like trying to rebirth the family. He even tells because he actually, you see him thinking about Apollonia, and he actually tells his kids about it. He actually says, you know, no, it was, and they actually shoot in that very yard where that happened, which must have been interesting for cast and crew all those years later. Particularly, you know, they brought children and grandchildren and stuff with them as well that wouldn't have been around when they shot the first one. But he tells his kids, he says, you know, he said, and she wanted to drive to me, and so, you know, there's an openness that his kid, on the one hand you think, well, he's telling his kids, but on the other hand he's telling his kids who are like 20 and 28 or whatever the characters are, 23 and 28 or whatever the characters are meant to be. It's taken him that long to be able to like open up and talk to them. They probably didn't even know he was ever married before. I sometimes wonder if Kay had ever known. At the same time, Vincent reports back about, you know, the fact that Michael could be assassinated and all the rest of it. And I think it's around that time he makes him the new head of the family.
Yeah, it's like without any sort of, yeah, you're matured now. There you.
Yeah, it's been 2 months. Jesus Christ. You've got to kind of forget about that. I mean, he has gone into a hostile environment, found threats against Michael, and hasn't kicked off and like tried to kill him or anything. He's come back and done what's asked of him. And at the start of the film, Michael said, "Just come with me for a while, see if you learn." So maybe that is time enough. Maybe he has had time to reflect on what he wants. And you know, I suppose if he's going to give up Mary, who seems to matter to him, I'm not quite sure why. I think that's another weakness in the character. You need a more charismatic actress there.
Yeah,
he was sleeping with Bridget Fonda at the start of the film. Now he's got this sort of teenage void.
He does seem to like sort of go with it like there's no without any like, oh, I have to give up the love of my life. Okay.
Well,
it's like
with a better actress opposite him, or certainly a stronger screen presence, where you really bought this connection. You might just see it as about his drive. His drive to, right, this is what he wants to do, which is why he's doing it properly. With the right casting, you'd go, okay, to give that up, he's not going to give it up to half-ass it and be really violent. If he's going to give this up, and it's that important to him, then he's decided being the head of the family is really important to him, and he's going to do it properly to justify that sacrifice. But of course, because he's given up some fairly uncharismatic teenage girl that we've only seen around each other really once or twice, I can't buy it as a sacrifice. I never really buy he's that interested in her. Well, I do, because Andy Garcia is a good enough actor, but I don't get why. So I've never really understood that. But he makes him head of the family. And I think the two things that always strike me is firstly how right Vincent looks in the chair. You go, yeah, I can see that. He's like head of the family. I can see that now. How sad Michael looks being led out the room by Connie.
It does look very sad.
He does look a little bit like Pacino did in the early films, doesn't he? He does have that kind of classic quality.
Yeah, he does. But I just felt Pacino looked really sad. I just thought, I don't know if it was just the fact that the family's going to continue, and perhaps he didn't want the family to continue in the name of crime, or whether it is just the passage of time, or
possibly.
Maybe he's hoping. He might be thinking any number of things. What will this guy make the same mistakes I made with family? That sort of thing. Could be any number of things.
Yeah, I think it's probably an acting choice of Pacino. I mean, you could have played it any other way. I think what you could say is there'll be a mixture of emotions, because you can be attached to certain places or certain things in life, even if you know it's right to move on, and you are absolutely dedicated to move on, but it's still kind of sad to leave it. You still get a little bit nostalgic, a little bit so this is the last time it'll be like this. There is certain elements of a sad nostalgia when leaving something that is right, that you really want. So I suppose it's like leaving home or something like that, similar, isn't it? It's like you have to move on, but you still get a little bit.
It's a fascinating mix of things, and the thing is, you do all those thinking. You do have all those thoughts. You don't just say, "Oh, look, he looks sad." my mind went on that journey. Yeah. As I watched it, I thought, I wonder if he's thinking this, and he might be thinking a bit of that, and he's watching Vincent, and there's an element of the passage of time, because there's a passing resemblance between one guy and the way they at least presented Al and made him up when he was a younger man. So, yeah, lots of that, and just the diminishing of strength, because he knows he's weakening. I don't know, a little bit of pride, a little bit of everything. But underpinning it all is like a sad, aging man being led out of a room by his sister, while a strong, vibrant man sits where he once sits, or once sat.
Kinda. Yeah,
I really like that. One of my two or three favourite scenes of the film, which tells you a lot about the film, because they don't match up to my favourite scenes from the earlier films. But that and the confession have always sort of stuck out to me. And then I think we go to the.
We have an assassination attempt. Well, attempted because the Alberto has hired a father and son hitman duo.
Just as a pope.
Best kind.
And the son likes to do donkey impressions, which I don't know why.
That was a bit weird. That was a bit strange. I was like, oh, okay.
Really irritating.
I like the drive-by bombing, I guess. It's like, oh, once an assassin, always an assassin.
And they just shoot. They just shoot. He goes, oh, fuck it.
Bombing's a shooting, yeah.
Yeah, drive-by shooting.
Yeah, it's not a very well thought out plan, was it? It was like, oh, Bob, that's bogged, right, see you later. Can we have a lift? No. Oh, bollocks.
So Don Tomasino.
Come on, we're just as priests,
That's Don Tomasino killed anyway. There's a couple of scenes in this film where I think the dialogue's really bad, and one is his scene with Kay at the start of the film, where you became my horror. I didn't like that very much. Sort of thing that probably reads all right in a book. We get a bit of Michael sat by his coffin of Don Tomasino, but he's talking to him about you could have lived a little longer and I could be closer to my dream. Why were you so loved and I was so feared? And I hated all of it. I hated all of that dialogue. It gets across the point that Michael is still screaming for an out and a legitimacy. That this job has extracted a price from him he never really has come to terms with having had to pay.
I guess it was kind of more of a reflection of character. I mean, he was still kind of doing in the same sort of profession, but it's like, well, why? What was it that you did that I did wrong? Like, what's the difference? Like, you know, it's like, why are you so loved and now so feared? You know, could I have done things differently? What did you do differently that I could?
You were a fucking sociopath, Michael.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. Why wasn't I loved like you? Well, you weren't much of a laugh, to be honest.
Yeah, you're a bit suspect.
You know, I think when he early in the film where he says, "I'm off to listen to some Tony Bennett records," and laughs. I think that's the first time Michael has laughed since he was outside Macy's or wherever it was with Kay in New York just before he finds out his dad's been shot. I don't think we've seen the character even fucking smile in the interim. You know, so I think it just goes back to my theme of the last episode. He's not that suited to it. Why were you loved and I was so feared? Well, probably he could incorporate it into his normal life and still be himself in a way Michael couldn't. Michael had to emotionally switch off to do this job. So it's interesting. I just don't think the dialogue's very well written.
Yeah.
But yeah, he makes Vincent take the Corleone name. That's worth mentioning. So we have another generation. I don't know if they were thinking sequels there. I'm sure Coppola wouldn't have been, but the studio might have. And then we go to this opera. Cavalleria Rusticana. I'm just looking it up. There have been some films of it as well. It's an opera in one act by Mascagni. Okay. Know nothing about it, but we do see bits of it, and I think Coppola just fancied doing this. I think he just said he'd always wanted to like direct something like this.
It does seem very interesting. Yeah, personally, I've not heard of it since coming. Since now, poor choice of words. I've not heard of it since this film.
I'm always learning about operas.
I was going to say since coming upon this film, but that was really bad. Since watching this film, I didn't know about it before, unfortunately.
There's obviously going to be an attempt on Michael's life from the father and son. I'm picturing Burt Large and his son from fucking like Doc Martin or something. Large and son. So there's going to be an attempt on his life, and I think they're kind of aware of this from Vincent. So Vincent's on the lookout. And I really, I wouldn't have been upset if Connie had won an award for this, you know, Talia Shire. I think she may have been nominated. She might have been one of the nominees.
Yeah, because Connie gives...
she poisons Altobello.
Yeah, with some death desserts.
Which I didn't think even though I'd seen this film before, I don't think I knew that's what cannoli was. I thought cannoli was like some derivative of cannelloni. I don't think I realised it was like sweet stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, it's an actual thing.
I mean, it should have really been like Death by Chocolate, shouldn't it? Just
It should have been Death by Chocolate.
Well, it should have been like that Monty Python sketch.
Oh, what the funniest joke in the world?
Joke warfare.
That
is funny. That was funny, that sketch. The joke warfare sketch. So he's given I think he suspects it's Connie. It's poison because he gets Connie to taste it.
Which makes you wonder, like, how was it poisoned? What's the
Well, he ate quite a lot of it. She only had a lick of it.
Yeah. Also, like, so she had like a random antidote in her back pocket.
Yeah, I just wondered if he'd look at her long enough that she'd go, "All right," and then just gob it out again. It's just, I mean, it's obviously not that. Heavily laced with it. You probably
like the poisons in the centre.
Well, I don't know.
It's in the gooey centre.
It might just require you to eat a certain amount of it.
Yeah.
Which he does because he's eating cannoli all the way through.
Yeah, he's loving it. He's loving that shit, and she keeps like checking up on him, and he keeps going like she keeps like, is he still eating it? Okay. Is he dead yet? Okay.
And then you got the Kindsey character who I've barely noticed in this film, the one that's hung from the bridge.
Yeah.
I've barely noticed him. I'm literally looking that one up because I didn't remember him at all. Archbishop Gilday, I'd noticed, he was like the treasury guy for the Vatican. So he'd be doing a lot of the talking with Michael, and he basically poisons the Pope. And is then killed in turn by Al Neri. I like that when Kay says, why have you still got Al Neri working with you? And he says something like, he's a good driver. And it's like, you're still a bad liar, Michael. So yeah, we've got the Godfather format of deaths going on around the place. So Don Lucchese is stabbed in the neck by Tomasino's bodyguard. Stabs him in the neck with his own spectacles. They had to refilm that a couple of times because there was too much blood. This film nearly got an NC-17.
That must have been like a suicide mission, though, wasn't it? Because it was basically.
Go on.
Because like he had to go in a place where they armed, and he had to go in unarmed, and his go right. I'm going to stab him with his own glasses. So like, there's no way out for him. Like he had to do it before getting shot himself. So that was the one thing about that. I just thought it looked very nice.
Well, that's very like the killing of Hyman Roth in the second film. The person who killed him was never going to survive that.
Yeah. So just everyone, but it was a bit of a risky one anyway because it.
But
was
then
like,
he was Tomasino's bodyguard anyway, so it was just like a bit of a
disposable.
Quite a bit of fall on the sword himself as well, I guess. I don't know, but you've got that. You've got the hanging from the bridge. You've got the Pope being poisoned by the Archbishop, and you've got the Archbishop being killed by Alneri. So that's out and about. At the Opera House itself, you've got Mosca, who manages to kill a few people around the place.
Yeah, he's killing off some of Michael or Vincent's men now.
Yeah, there is a point, and it was in all the trailers, where the sights are on Michael while Michael sat in like his box or whatever, but they don't manage to get a shot off at him. Mm-hmm. What's the other one? So yeah, he gets another shot when they're outside. And he catches Michael in the shoulder but shoots Mary. Just as Mary's complaining about being separated from Vincent.
And Vincent shoots him. And his son, nothing happens to his son, he just kind of like...
His son is stood right beside Mary, because he's basically, or behind Mary, because he's sort of saying, I think they must be going to some after party, because he's trying to get them to go with them. It's quite low key, he's acting like a perfectly regular person, like, come on, we've got to go to wherever. And then suddenly this sort of gunfight breaks out.
Yeah. I mean, he suppose it has a shotgun, doesn't he? And then he gets that taken away from him because he's thinking, hang on, let me check that. And that's all you see of him, really.
Yeah. And Mary is shot. They drop out the sound on the first half of Michael's scream. He screams with agony over it all. He's just been shot as well, which doesn't help.
It's really like emotive, isn't it? It's agonising.
I always thought he was going to die down then of a heart attack or something like that when I first saw that.
It's like watching the end of Total Recall when the eyes are about to burst out of Arnie's head or something. He really looks quite distorted by it. I can't imagine. I don't have children. I cannot imagine. But Coppola has children. And the other thing is Coppola lost a son in the mid-80s. It was like a powerboat crash.
Mm.
There was somebody fairly famous in that crash with him. I'm going to look him up. Gio Coppola, hang on. It was Giancarlo. Died in 1986. Here we go. Coppola was killed in a speedboating accident on Memorial Day 1986, aged 22. Griffin O'Neill, who was piloting the boat. So son of Ryan O'Neill. Had attempted to pass between two slow-moving boats, unaware that both boats were connected by a tow line. While O'Neill barely had time to duck, Coppola was struck and killed. At the time of the incident, O'Neill was being directed by Francis Ford Coppola in Gardens of Stone and was subsequently replaced. O'Neill was charged with manslaughter over the incident. He ultimately pleaded death to the charge. At the time of his death, his fiancée was 2 months pregnant with their only daughter. And little Gia is in this film. You see, there's a bit of the party early on where Michael dances with his daughter.
Yeah.
And there's a little girl trying to like separate them and ends up clinging onto like Sophia's legs. That's Gia. That's Gia's stuff. That was worth mentioning. What I'm saying is he's directing the death of somebody's reaction to the death of a child, and he's been through it. Yeah.
That's got to be hard to do anyway.
We talk about Pacino overacting at times. I never had a problem with this. I've never had a problem with this at all.
Like the only time it's kind of like he does have a couple of moments where his character is angry, and he does get kind of like shouty, like, as we know him now. But I think that there are probably worse films I've seen him in where he does go over the top a little bit. I'll say that there are 2 moments in this film where he does kind of get shouty, but apart from that, it's not massively overwrought, I would say.
I was waiting for the scream. There is something about cutting out the first half of the scream that I almost need the catharsis of it. I was holding my breath until I could hear the scream, and then I sort of could breathe again.
There's almost a sense of like the scream is that loud that he can't hear it. It's like it's beyond.
I know what you mean. It's off the register.
Yeah.
It's literally off the scale.
Yeah. I mean, there is a sense of the ultimate price that Michael has paid. I mean, he's now done the final.
Whereas he'd never been punished that much. Yes, he had lost people close to them, but I mean, when your brother is Sonny, there's a chance you're going to lose Sonny, because Sonny's a hot-headed mobster. His father was a mobster. His mother lived to a decent age. Fredo, I know he killed Fredo, but
Poor Fredo.
This is the ultimate price, losing one of his children, and particularly Mary.
It almost feels like the price he paid for getting out. Almost, it's like he had to do one last mob type thing to get out, and this is the price he has to. He personally paid for it, and it's kind of.
But he got the soul. He got the soul stone for it, though.
Spoiler alert for Avengers.
But yeah, I think when you read up on this film, he does talk about Coppola didn't want to make this film, not really, and I think that shows. But once you decide to do it, you have to decide what your interests are and what your hook is, particularly if you're writing it yourself, and you can decide where the story goes. And that there is certainly a feeling that I think he felt that maybe you could argue Michael hadn't been punished enough in his life, and this is the opportunity. And how would Coppola, in his own life experience, show somebody suffering as much as it's possible to suffer death of a child? And
then we get to the final scene where, so many years later on, Michael, he's got an orange in his hand.
He's got an orange in his hand.
I spotted that, street corner.
Yeah, but you missed the Bigfruit box office earlier in the film.
I was too concerned with the hail of bullets and his lucky coat.
Not so lucky coat.
Yes.
I don't looking now.
That's like watching hours of porn, not noticing there was any sex in it, but then like spotting a cheeky hand job at the end. Actually, it's nothing like that, but there you go. This is the only we're not given the date. He looks a lot older. He's either blind or blinding, on his way to going blind. Because you see him put dark glasses on, and he doesn't. He looks a bit infirm. The only reason I know the date is it was on the box set. One of them, I think, the video box set had it as the Godfather saga 1901 to 1997 or something like that. So it's 18 years later. So, he's about 77, 78. He's obviously retired to Sicily. One wonders if he ever left after the death of his daughter. Particularly as his son is now working worldwide, if you like. Kay, the thing is, he was on the verge of getting Kay back as well. That probably nixed that. Michael's business having now led to the death of her only daughter. So, one wonders if he ever left Sicily. I mean, Don Tomasino's killed during this film. I mean, there's a property going there, effectively.
Yeah, crumbling estate.
He'll probably just stay there and then, because, no one else ready to go, really. So
he had a bit like the end of 2, where he's staring into space. He's probably had a couple of decades of that, effectively. A couple of decades of just, he sat in the garden of Tom Tomasino's villa, it says that on the page here. And actually you recognise it as such. And then we see him just basically die. Not much made of it. No.
It's quite understated, not unstated, but there isn't...
every time I watch it, I'm a bit worried for the dog. Because you think he's acting, don't fall on the dog.
I've always thought it was a bit of a unnecessary scene, but why couldn't Michael just died on the steps with his daughter? if you're going to kill him off, but it just seemed a bit unnecessary. But to be honest, unfortunately, I think I prefer this because it just adds like this extra amount of time of mourning and almost like it's even more tragic, isn't it?
He has a heart attack on the steps. He suffered for 2 or 3 minutes. Here he suffers for like a couple of decades. As evidenced by, I think, I've never thought about it before. I thought, at some point he went back to Sicily. Actually, I doubt he ever left. You know?
Yeah.
He goes to Sicily for a positive thing. His son making it is something he was a bit reluctant to let him do, but the Campbells played off. So his son's a star. You know, he's got this business dealing he's quite positive about. He's back in the old country. We see him really enjoy taking his family around these places and telling them little stories. You know, I love all that, and it ends up with he probably never goes home again.
Yeah. Yeah, you kind of get that impression, don't you, I think?
And that's it, the Godfather trilogy. 1901 to 1997.
I love a
That's
happy
an
ending.
old series.
Yeah. It is an old series. But
In terms of years, well, I don't know, one is probably the longest. But is that one of the longest series that we've done in terms of years spanned within that movie universe? Feels like it.
I don't know, how do you count Back to the Future?
Well, this is it, Back to the Future.
1885 to 2015.
2000 something, yeah, that's quite long.
No, I mean, I don't know. It's a proper family saga, though. It's.
Oh, it is, no, definitely. It's in the old-fashioned sense.
Final thoughts, Becca?
It has its good parts and it has its bad parts. No, I think definitely kind of reviewing it with you guys has helped me to appreciate certain scenes a bit more. But like, if I was to rank the series, I would literally go like part 1, part 2, part 3 in that order. I still think, like, you know, the Godfather, the first film, and definitely like will cast a very long shadow within popular culture. And like there have been few, you know, lots of imitators, but rarely has there been a film which kind of equals it. I mean, perhaps maybe Goodfellas, but I haven't seen something, you know, it's certainly taken a long time for me to see something of that similar stature within cinema. Not the kind of declining quality, but in terms of like the casting choices, like we didn't speak about George Hamilton, that was a bit random.
Yeah, like, why would he ever talk about George Hamilton?
You know,
You didn't need the character.
No,
I mean,
it's
there's literally a bit of he's there to receive exposition in the.
he is Basil, basically.
Well, Tom Hagen has died at some point, and his eldest son has become like a priest. That's where I got a little bit confused between him and Anthony. And he's telling George Hamilton's character about it. And he does stand up at one point where there's a complaint about the Immobiliare deal and answer it. But apart from that, it's almost the need to have a consigliere type figure there. But he doesn't actually do any heavy lifting whatsoever. None.
I mean, realistically, like, Michael, if Tom Hagen died, then Michael would have a replacement.
Yes, he would, but what I'm saying
the point
is...
he wouldn't be a prominent
If this
character.
had been Tom Hagen, he would have been given a bit more to do.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I think the rewrite to change it has minimised the character. I don't think you give this to Robert Duvall as a part. It's too little. He's a supporting character, but he's given a bit more meat than this usually.
Yeah. There would have been more of it if it was...
Hence, when you talk about the casting, I don't really have a... The only problem I've got with George Hamilton's casting is, A, it isn't Robert Duvall, and B, sort of conceptual, in that, conceptually, if you're trying to sort of produce the next in a series that has started with 2 masterpieces, George Hamilton sends the wrong message. It sends the wrong message. Let's get that guy who was in an episode of Love Boat or something. I don't know if he was, but I'm sure if you look back, he was in
random
shit like
television
that.
series.
He's fine for the scenes he's in. He's absolutely fine.
I'm not saying it's a bad performance, but I'm not.
Why would you cast George Hamilton? It's
a bit random.
You know, and during his commentary, he's quite complimentary about his own daughter as well. How there's a rawness and realness to her because she's not an actress, but. I don't know. Oh,
definitely was. Yeah, kind of my earlier comment about, you know, admiring him was as a director of an actor, you know, which was very new, a very little screen experience, obviously apart from the baby from the first film. But yeah, there's certainly that rawness to her, and that adds like a layer of depth and believability to her performance. But yeah, I think it took me a little bit longer to come around to this film. Definitely, there's some really interesting scenes to it. But for me, it's kind of the stuff with the Immobiliare. It does kind of take a while to get going, and there's a lot of like business speak. But it's really interesting if you want to get into the minutiae between like how the mafia, there's a history, how it was created, and how it's intertwined with the Pope. That's very interesting, very fascinating. There's a lot to learn in this film, but sadly didn't interest me at this time. Maybe later on.
I was going to say I'm going to totally disagree. I don't think any of it's interesting at all.
It's presented, and I'm sure in itself, extrapolated like from the world of film, it must be quite interesting. But this film doesn't really make it interesting, and up until that point, there's not very much that grabs me, unfortunately. But so I mean, all the principal players are present and correct. Performance is great. I'll say Al Pacino, famed for overacting later on in his career. Not so much of it here. There are a couple of shouty moments, as I noticed. But after that, he's fine. It's it's convincing. It's believable. It's very heartfelt, very touching. As you say, that's where the kind of, as Chris said earlier, that's where the line comes from. I keep trying to get out, but I keep getting pulled back in. And that's like his arc, as Godfather and trying to get out of it, for example, from the first film. I can't really add much more to that, unfortunately.
I rather enjoyed my time with it. As I said before, my opinion about it isn't to be changed that much. I do agree with Dave that it is nowhere near as bad as it reputation. I think people could be over dramatic about these sort of things. Either it's the best thing ever or it's the worst thing ever.
Well, even allowing for overstatement we're used to now. This is a ridiculously over the top example.
Definitely. But it isn't as good as say the other two films. But it's not an insult either. I mean, it's actually perfectly fine. It's very watchable. It has nice moments. It has a nice reflective quality to the character of Michael, and I think that's where it shines. I think where it doesn't shine, as I said before, is just how generic it can be. But other than that, there are scenes, there are moments, there are touches which are definitely worth your time in. So, I'm absolutely enjoyed. Had a better viewing wave than I thought I would with this. So, maybe it was that. Maybe it was like the low expectations, and it's like, oh, I'm pleasantly surprised by that. But yeah, no, I had to solid watch it.
I think it's just a bizarre world we live in now. But we were in this. Things haven't just. It isn't. It reminds you, it isn't just the internet that's done this. The way people have banged on about The Last Jedi in the last 6 months is just like so over the top. It's just a fucking film, and it's nowhere near as bad as you're going on about. We were in this world 30 years ago as well. This film is not Highlander 2. It just isn't. I think if it's got a problem, it's that it doesn't need to exist. It's that no film needs to exist. But there is the first two films have a series of events that drive us through it, particularly the first one, and character work is like informed by those events, and you see characters changing in response to things. But you could strip out a lot of the character work and you'd still have a fascinating story. Wouldn't be as good a film, but it would still have a lot of good stuff in it. With this particular film, the story is just a load of stuff that happens to allow Coppola to make the character story, the character beats and thematic points he wants to make. He wants to make some points about Michael as an older man, waning in health and power. He wants to make some points about the transfer of power. He wants to make some points about looking back on your life and regret that comes with that. And all of those things require a plot. They require something to drive us through the 2 or 3 hours where we're going to learn all of this. And in comes the Immobiliare stuff, which I just don't care. I mean, as a point, the fact that it's the church, and you think, well, that in itself leads you to, well, how clean is the church? This sort of servant of God, but there's some dirty money there and stuff. That's kind of interesting conceptually. The idea that you use the church as your grab for legitimacy, but you do it by effectively bribing a load of people. All of that in itself is fairly interesting. But every time they start talking about Immobiliare, I'm not that interested. I'm interested in Michael and his family. And I think I'm sounding like a broken record because I've been saying that for the last 2 weeks. That's what I'm interested in. Michael's the through line through this story. The fact I'm still interested tells me that the character is more consistent with perhaps his earlier incarnations than maybe I thought. It's a good solid watch. We don't need it. Coppola's about right. This is an epilogue. But as it goes, it's not a bad epilogue. And despite the fact that it's even divorced from the rest of the film, Michael falling out of his chair as an old man on a Sicilian estate, in the the very country that sort of gave birth to this family, does give it a degree of closure. So for everything, I'm glad it's here.
And then that's it. So we have Chris's Fruity Corner, but I feel like we're missing something.
I think we're missing some questions. I don't know why I feel that.
I feel a bit bad. I went to do some quiz questions. I got the answers from last week, but I just quick shout out to Film Buff Becca. So Brian, thank you for answering our questions.
Yeah. Okay,
Good job.
scrub that then. What we're missing is some quiz answers, Chris.
Well, I didn't do any for part 3 because there is no part 4,
No.
and obviously
We could make one.
in the in-between from here and Marvel, we are doing an episode to be announced shortly. So I've done neither fun facts nor stupid quiz.
What were the answers to last week's?
So last week I have. So yeah, my quiz questions last week. Early on in the film, we learned that Vito had an older brother who was murdered, and what was his name? Paolo. Question number 2, what was Vito Corleone's real name? It was Andolini.
Okay.
Corleone being the town of his birth. Question number 3, when we see Robert De Niro as Vito, what year is it in the film? It was 1917. Question number 4, Commander asks Vito to hide a package for him. What's in it? It's guns. And question number 5, who does Michael have killed at the end of part 2? And that's just Paul Fredo. But yeah, I went to do a quiz for this week and I thought, a bit redundant. So,
yeah.
So
and the answer, 5 answers of who cares.
5 answers of Paul Fredo.
That's the problem. We're going through the film fairly forensically tonight, and consequently, with the backlash against it, I'm defending it, and I don't think it's a particularly bad film, but I've no great need to watch it very often, certainly.
I was going to say, it's not certainly up there with, like, Freddy Got Fingered, or...
What is?
What is, eh?
That film has no plot.
The film's appalling. That film's
That's
appalling.
not Treasure of Soap on a Rope.
It's not even funny, it's just awful.
You
But then
can't
Tom Green
harm
fan.
me, not with my cheese helmet.
Yeah. Tom Green's not a very funny man, to be honest.
And there goes Tom Green's career.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, so it's just one. It's kind of average. I say it has good parts, has bad parts. But
Yeah. Anyway, social media, folks.
You can find me at CinemaTrots on Twitter, not that I tweet that much, but you can find me on there. You can also find this podcast with all the backlog of all the episodes at cinematronics.co.uk.
And if you want to know what we thought of X-Men Apocalypse, there's also a few specials in Christie.
But yeah, we will probably be doing a summer review shortly.
What we tend to do is, it's normally the first film that comes along that you'd class as a summer film in style through to the end of August, I think it is, and then in September we record a summer review. So we'll do the same this year.
I think might do 2, because I think we've got quite a heavy start with Black Panther.
Particularly Black Panther starts.
And because there's
February.
kind of a bit of a break, with the World Cup, I think it's probably an optimum time to squeeze one in and then pick it up later on.
Let's squeeze one in and knock one out.
Yes, okay.
And then later in the summer we can knock out another one.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely.
When does the World Cup start?
Any
idea?
July?
Hang on a minute. None of us watch football, so we don't have a fucking idea. Hang on a minute.
All I know is it's in Russia.
Hang on a minute. World Cup schedule. Yeah. Hang on a minute. No, it'll give me some idea of when it fucking. Yeah, it starts in a couple. No, it starts mid-June, like 15th of June. So somewhere around there would be a good time to knock out an early episode. All right. Okay. So part 1 of the summer review coming soon.
Yeah.
The point still stands. Our entire back catalogue is on that site, as well as any Cinematronic episodes, and the last 4 of those I've been on. So, and I'll be on the next 2 that are coming in the next few months.
Because I like to spice things up.
Yeah, those last 4 do cover about 3 years. But it's like I said on an earlier episode, if Chris presented This Is Your Life, I'd have 57 red books. Because it'd be Dave again. You can find me at ThePastyKid1976 on Twitter.
And you can find us at Expect Us to Talk on Twitter. You can also find us on Facebook. You just type in the search bar, Do You Expect Us to Talk? Type in the same, Do You Expect Us to Talk on YouTube, and you can find our reviews there. And also iTunes and Stitcher. But I'd recommend for iTunes, some of our earlier episodes are fast disappearing. So check us out on YouTube, or also at Chris's website, cinematronics.co.uk. If you like, you can drop us an email, expectusttalk@gmail.com. I think that's it.
Do you know what we're missing? Do you know what this show has really missed in the last few months? I think we've had far too little in the way of scrumptulescent beard action. I think we should get Charlie back.
Yes, we are missing Charlie. He's the 5th Beatle, or the 4th Expected Talker. What else?
He's the 5th Beatle.
No.
He's the 5th Beatle, or that 4th that doesn't exist.
No. Oh, that 3rd person that we don't have. Who is that? Well, how many members are in Python? He's the missing Python.
All right. Well, anyway.
Anyway,
that'll need a bit of an edit. Which means Becca.
Do You Expect Us to Talk will return with our commentary featuring Charlie on Star Wars: Empire Strikes Back.